My first ride on my FXR after it came back from the dead. Let's get into it. Woo! The FXR is back! Alright, what's going on YouTube? FXDLS Brooklyn is back in the building. If you saw my last video, then word on the street is the 1988 FXR is back from the dead. And let's stop talking about it. Let's fire this thing up and let's get some of the best miles a Harley Davidson can offer, which is FXR miles. There's your startup. The good old Evo. Cannot beat it, man. Classic. Alright, let's get into this. Woo! Now that, my friends, feels good. She is still the ripper that I remember 8 months ago. It's like we're picking back up like nothing even happened. And I really didn't know how I was gonna feel being back on my 1988 FXR after going through the biggest physical trauma in my entire life with this bike. And you know what's crazy? I hopped on this bike and I actually felt more connected than ever with this bike, having gone through the darkest of times with this bike and having remembered that this bike saw me through one of the darkest moments in my entire life. I don't look at this bike as a cursed bike. I look at this bike as a blessed bike. And I really didn't think I would ever be throwing a leg back on. There was a part of me that thought I would never be able to throw a leg over this bike again. You know, just given the shape that it was in. This bike was absolutely destroyed. It was declared totaled. The sheer amount of parts that were going to need to be replaced, the sheer amount of work that needed to be done. You know, I really just thought, like, even if this bike ever was going to be potentially rideable again, it was going to take at least a span of 5 to 10 years to get it back in that condition, just given the amount of work that was going to be required and also the amount of parts that were going to have to be sourced that obviously are just not even made anymore. We're talking about a bike from 1988. You know, I never gave up on this bike, but I also was just realistic, and I knew that given what I was having to deal with in terms of getting back to work and physical therapy and everything I had to focus on, that I was not going to be able to give this bike the love and attention that it needed to be back in riding shape. But the road captain had other ideas, and you're seeing the product of my dad's persistence, hard work, and perseverance, which he's passed down to me, which is why I'm still here doing the damn thing. So again, huge shout out to the old man for going above and beyond and somehow getting this bike to be rideable again. And you can see there's even some things that are upgraded from the last time you probably saw this bike. Like, look guys, the RPM, it actually reads the RPMs again, you know? Probably all the videos I've done prior, it was just kind of ticked out onto 0. And someone multiple people in the comment section would always be saying, hey bro, you gotta fix that tack, bro. And I would always give some smart response such as, nah man, the tack is fine. This bike just runs on incredibly low RPMs. So yeah, the bike feels just as good as where I left it. And again, I just can't believe that, given that the bike was mangled in pieces after being smashed and run over by an SUV in Brooklyn. And I made a video recently where I was comparing the Lowrider ST to an FXR, and I was really careful about my wording, which is, I said, to quote myself, I said that the Lowrider ST feels closer to an FXR than it does a Dyna, but I was very clear to say that it is not an FXR or even a mirror of the FXR, because I am a firm believer that there is nothing like an FXR except an FXR, which is why us FXR owners go through the blood, sweat, and tears to keep these bikes running, because anyone out there who either owns an FXR or rides an FXR knows that it is an absolute labor of love to be able to have an FXR doing what I'm doing right now, which is crushing miles like a boss multiple decades later. It really requires a lot of effort just to keep these bikes in running shape. But the payoff, well, you're seeing the payoff. You have, hands down, the tightest handling Harley Davidson that ever existed. You know, like I said, the ST does things that are reminiscent to how an FXR handles in regards to tightness and nimbleness, but nothing is ever going to do it as good as an FXR itself. Damn, guys, I really, really miss this bike. Dude, look at that beaver. Anyone else see FXDLS Brooklyn save that beaver? I did my good deed for the day. Oh my god, how I missed this bike so much. There is just no bike that is as fun to ride as a Harley Davidson FXR. Damn. And I guess the thing that I didn't bring up in my previous video, as we were firing the FXR back up again, is the idea of what to do next. Because my plan after the wreck had happened was, I said, alright, you know what, over the course of 5 to 10 years, I'm not only gonna spend time with my dad to rebuild this bike to its prior glory, but I was gonna build it into even something more special, like a super polished and well done FXR, like kind of like the ones you would see at the FXR Jam, if you saw my video on that. Like, some of those are the most polished and well done FXRs you could find. And I was almost thinking of, like, yeah, let's go crazy on this bike, and, you know, to really celebrate surviving on this bike and celebrate still being able to ride this bike. Like, let's just go crazy and make this bike a stupid performance FXR. And you know, honestly, now that I'm back on it in the shape that it was, you know, we're talking about the original paint, a lot of original parts on this bike, a part of me kind of just wants to leave it alone like this and not even touch it, you know? Like, there's kind of something to be said, like the coolness factor of an FXR a lot of times is how little you've actually touched the FXR, you know? Because I feel like there's two schools of thought in terms of running these bikes, which is the traditionalist FXR is back. Damn. Yeah, so you have the traditionalist who will, you know, leave these bikes pretty close to stock and keep it as stock as possible, which, you know, there's just something really cool about that. But then you have the opposite of that, which is someone who's going to throw on a paint job and, you know, put some serious performance parts. You're going to put your S&S 111, all that stuff. And I feel like mine is kind of somewhere in the middle of those two things, where I do have some performance parts on this bike. It's got a huge cam in it, you know, it's got a Fab 28 exhaust, it's got this and that, but it's also, you know, it's got a lot of things that are throwbacks to the actual bike itself, to when it was stock, such as, you know, we didn't mess around with the paint, right? We didn't touch a couple other things to give it that old school feel. So my FXR kind of lives in between those two worlds. And I don't know, guys, I almost kind of think I want to keep it that way at this point, and to just kind of leave it alone and celebrate the bike that it was before I experienced one of my darkest moments. Because as you can see, this bike still absolutely rips, which is how we built it to perform. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. But as we chill at this light, you're catching me at a moment of pure gratitude. Stay safe out there and stay low. Ride FXRs. They are worth it. And on that, FXDLS Brooklyn is out.